What is happening, investors? Welcome to the channel. It is your boy Jack, and today we're going to be speaking about Delta Airlines and Carnival Cruise Lines and figuring out which one, if we could only buy one, is the better stock. It will somewhat come down to what kind of investor you are and how much risk you're willing to take, but we want to figure out if we could only buy one, which is it going to be. Now we have a lot to cover in today's video. We have to talk about how the stimulus package will affect these industries, how the Saudis purchased an 8% share in CCL, how long will it take these companies to make money again, why both of these companies are high risk, high reward, oil prices, that's going to affect both of them, their current assets and current liabilities, how hard both of their stocks have been hit, how much they've plummeted down, and what percentage of their individual markets they actually own. Right before we get into the very first point, please smash that like button for me, it helps me out massively. Subscribe and hit that bell button if you're new around here, and drop me a comment with your thoughts on the video at the end of it, and let me know which one you would buy if you could only buy one. We are starting it off with Delta, and Delta reaches deal for $5.4 billion in federal relief funding. As part of the US stimulus package, this is the share that Delta is getting. A nice $5.4 billion, but it does come with quite a few strings attached. They're not just being given this money. So what is that made up of? The package includes a combination of grants, which the airlines don't need to pay back, which is obviously fantastic, and low interest loans, which the airlines will need to pay back to the government down the line. So it's not just a free handout, they will have to pay back some of the money that they've received. And we can see what that's made up of here. The $5.4 billion for Delta includes a $1.6 billion unsecured low interest 10-year loan. It also calls for Delta to provide the federal government with warrants to acquire about 1% of their stock at $24.39 over 5 years. So it really is not the worst deal in the world. They're receiving $5.4 billion and they're only going to have to pay back $1.6 billion of that with a relatively low interest rate. And when we compare that to where Carnival is sitting and what they had to do to take on this new debt, they pay steep rates for nearly $6 billion in new debt. That's a lot of debt for Carnival. It's priced private offerings of $4 billion of secured notes with a coupon of 11.5% interest. That is a big amount of interest. It also raised $1.75 billion in convertible notes at 5.75 interest, and that debt matures in 2023. So Carnival are going to have to pay an awful lot more money back than Delta will straight off the bat. On the $4 billion loan alone, they're going to be paying back nearly $500 million in interest. Just interest. I understand why Carnival had to do this, because without taking on the debt, there was no chance of survival. Bankruptcy was just a matter of time, and the government isn't helping them out, but they're in a much worse position than Delta when it comes to debt right off the bat. Now we're just going to have a look at the company's total assets and liabilities as of the end of last year, the most recent information we have. Now this doesn't take into account obviously the new debt that they've taken on, so we'll have to keep that in mind. So looking at Delta, finished last year with $8.25 billion in current assets, and their total assets were $64.5 billion. So that includes, all of their planes, their land, everything along those lines. Now their current liabilities are at $20.2 billion. We compare that to their total assets of $8.25 billion. Not the prettiest. And now that they're actually making far less money due to the fact that all of the flights are pretty much cancelled, that's why they really needed this loan from the government. Their total liabilities are $49.17 billion, so compared to our total assets, that is a nice enough position to be in. Obviously you don't want to have to touch your long-term assets, but they're in a relatively okay position. And then when we go have a look at the list of the largest airlines in the world, and we see that Delta is in first place, they make the most revenue of any airline out there. That's a very good sign. I think it's quite obvious that not every airline in the world is just going to disappear because of this virus. Yes, a lot of the smaller guys will. There's no way they'll survive it. But do you think airplanes are going to just completely disappear off the face of the earth? That's never ever going to happen. So if anybody's going to survive, surely it's going to be the big guys, the big players, the ones who make the most money, and that is Delta. And this is quite clear to be true because airlines are #1 priority for virus relief, says Trump. Big Daddy Trump said that. He wants to keep airlines alive, baby. If there's one thing he wants to keep alive, it's airlines. And what airlines does he want to keep alive? The big boys who make lots of money and pay lots of taxes. Delta, that's who he wants to keep alive. So although they're not in the best position in the whole world right now, they have the support of Trump, of America essentially. So having a nice little look at Carnival now, okay, we can say we have total current assets of just over $2 billion, okay? Total assets altogether of just over $45 billion. Now, current liabilities, $9.127 billion. This is terrible compared to the $2 billion that they have on hand of total current assets. This is obviously why they had to go and take such high interest loans to the number of $6 billion. Without those loans, it would have been a matter of a few months before Carnival went bust. They had to take these on to have any chance of surviving. And now that they have taken them on, they can survive about 8 to 10 months without bringing in any money whatsoever, and it's expected that they'll be making money at the latest by the end of summer. So although nobody ever wants to have to take on that much debt at such high interest, they did exactly what they had to do. They weren't getting support by the government. This is their only option. This was their only way out, and it's given them a much better chance of survival. Again, we look at their total liabilities, which are actually 19.6 billion, so they're not doing absolutely terrible in regards to long-term debt, especially when we see they have total assets of 45 billion. It's quite nice to see that they weren't holding too much long-term debt before all of this happened. It gave them that bit more wiggle room to take that 6 billion at high interest rates, and more than likely be able to come out on top. So obviously, straight off the bat, neither company is in the absolute best position in the world, but Delta definitely has an advantage. You know, they were able to get money with far less interest rates. They're going to have to pay back far less as a whole compared to Carnival, and Delta will more than likely be making money quicker. You know what I mean? They'll be up and running. The flights will be up and running faster than these cruises will. Not to mention, just having the likes of Daddy Trump on your side is a massive advantage. You can think of Trump whatever you want, but at the end of the day, if he's going to keep airlines alive, that's good for us investors. Now, like what I did with Delta, let's have a look at how big Carnival actually is in their sector of cruise lines, and we can see they are massive. They carry 47.4% of all cruise line passengers. That is an awful lot of market share. So again, the question has to be asked, do we think that cruise ships are going to completely disappear off the face of the earth? More than likely not. A lot of the little guys are going to be more likely to go bankrupt before the big guys like Carnival, especially when they're taking action so quickly, taking on this new debt to survive for longer. So they are the biggest player by an absolute mile. But the economy doesn't care about that. If the economy shuts down, it doesn't care if you're the biggest guy or the smallest guy, you are going to get absolutely hammered regardless. Still though, Delta and Carnival, two absolutely massive, two of the biggest players in their individual sectors. So now what we're doing is we're having a look at Delta's 3-month stock chart, and we can see a 3-month change of negative 60.87%, which is absolutely terrible. There was a stage that we're trading just above the $60 mark. We got down just to about 22, just below $22, and we're currently sitting at 24.27. And what's worth keeping in mind is that when we were up at that 60 mark, that was their high. Like, that was their high. They've been growing continually, you know what I mean? 5 years ago, they were sitting just over $40 a share. They got up to 60. You know, it's been some really good growth, but now this is obviously horrific. But with how horrific it is in mind, if you believe in the company and you believe that they're going to be able to get through this tough time, it's an absolutely amazing price to get in at as a long-term investor. Now, Carnival, I'm showing you their 5-day chart just so that you can see how volatile this is. Down 7%, up 8%, down 1%, down 4%, up 6%. It's all over the place. Now we have a look at the 3-month chart, okay? There was a stage we were up over $50 3 months ago. We're now at $12.56. There's been 2 times where it's dipped below $8. So keep that in mind. Now it's down just about 76%, but it was down as low as $8 a share. But this has been standard in the cruise line industry as a whole. They haven't performed worse than their competitors, than Royal Caribbean or Norwegian, anyone along those lines. They're all performing about the same right now. So again, the big question is, will they survive or will they go bankrupt? Because if they survive, this is an absolutely amazing price to get in. I've spoken about these guys a good bit. I spoke about why I didn't get into them last time they hit $8. But if they are to fall down towards that level again, I'm going to be very tempted to start picking up some positions. If any of you guys are in Carnival right now, I really pray for your hearts. I hope your blood pressure is not too high, because it must be scary, man. But obviously, just looking at the stock charts doesn't give us much information on which one's better. Carnival's been hit harder than Delta, but they've both been hit extremely hard. But from what we've seen so far, I think that most of you guys will come to the conclusion that Delta seems like the safer, better stock to buy right now. Their chance of survivability is much higher. There is almost, in my opinion, no chance of Delta going bankrupt. I just really don't see it happening. With Carnival, I'd rate it probably 10 to 20% chance of them going bankrupt. It's unlikely, but I do see a world where it happens. It all depends how long this virus situation goes on for. Now, obviously the same can be said for Delta, but I think if things are to get much worse, they're just going to get more and more help from the government. As Trump said, he wants to keep them alive. Delta are the biggest player. Now, on the other hand, if you're looking for, the riskiest play that could potentially give the most growth, that's where I think Carnival takes it. You know what I mean? If you want that really high risk, high reward one, if you get into Carnival at $8, there is very much so a world where you see a 500% increase in less than 5 years. I don't think the same can be said for Delta. I think if you get into Delta even now at $25, I don't see a world where you get a 500% increase in the next 5 years. I don't see that whatsoever. But with Carnival, that is a very real possibility. But for me personally, I'd rather go with Delta. They still show absolutely immense growth potential, far more than your average company, but the odds of them going bankrupt are so much lower than Carnival. These are just my opinions, obviously, from the research that I have done. I'm not a financial advisor. Never do something just because somebody else on the internet does it. Be like George, always form your own opinions. Isn't that right, George? So with all of that being said, if I could only invest in one of these companies, for me personally, it's going to be Delta. That's just the kind of investor I am. I like investing in relatively safe companies that I believe will grow in the long term and also will ultimately pay a nice dividend. But if you are that adrenaline junkie who wants the absolutely massive returns, you go to the casino and you putting all your money on green, Carnival's the one for you. I actually do own a position in Delta. I'll throw that on the screen right now. I don't own one in Carnival, so that should be answer enough. Again, when I say that they're a relatively safe company, that's comparing them to Carnival. There's way safer companies out there. Check out my last video if you want to see some actual safe companies. Not safe in comparison to Carnival, but just safe full stop. But anyway guys, I hope that you did enjoy today's video. If you did, please remember to smash that like button. Drop me a comment with your thoughts on Carnival or Delta below and your positions in them. And until the next one guys, peace.